Hello and welcome to episode 101 of the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and confidence coach, Anna Manning. And today we're talking about getting the right environment for your confidence to grow. So this week I watched a film called Wilding, and it made me think about the work that we're doing here to grow your confidence. So in this film, a couple of farmers, they owned an estate in the south of England. And they tried to farm this estate. They tried to grow crops, they'd kept animals, but the crop growing just hadn't really worked. They could not get a good harvest. And an expert came in to talk to them about some trees that were on their land. And he said to them, well, what you've been doing while you've been farming this land is essentially killing these trees. They do not have the environment under the ground that they need in order to grow. And the crops that they've been trying to grow, also, it wasn't working because they didn't have the kind of soil, they didn't have the kind of environment they needed. And this expert told them that the way that they'd been farming the lands had created a kind of dead zone, an environment where the soil was virtually lifeless. If you think of soil which is healthy, it contains microbes, it contains bugs, it contains fungus, right? It's alive, it's teeming with things which give us life and allow things to grow. And their soil was like a dead zone. For so long, they'd been doing what most farmers in the Western world do and had been planting and ploughing and churning. And because the soil was getting more and more degraded, they would add in nutrients that were meant to support the soil, but they were also adding in chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and fungicides to kill off the pests and the things that they didn't want. And those harmful chemicals had been damaging everything in the soil. And churning up the soil had been damaging the soil to the point where the soil was not capable of sustaining life. And here's the point that confidence comes in. Your internal environment is extremely important when you're thinking about being confident. If your internal environment is not capable of sustaining confidence, anything you do to help your confidence will be a quick fix. So when I'm working with clients, we're working on the environment which the confidence is going to grow from. We're focusing on getting the soil right. We're focusing on getting the environment right. And sometimes I call that our internal culture. That environment on our inside needs to be right if our confidence is going to grow. Just like plants, they do their thing when the environment is right, okay? They have everything they need written into their cells. And when you get the environment right, when you get the soil right, the plant grows. Confidence is the same. When you get the environment right, the confidence will grow. So in this film, Wilding, their soil, their environment that they were trying to grow stuff in was virtually dead because it had been degraded over years with pesticides and fungicides and chopped up, and it was devoid of life, so nothing could grow in it. And if you don't feel the kind of confidence that you want at work, this is what you should be focused on. Whether the environment is right in order for your confidence to grow. Your soil may essentially be dead because it's been degraded over years by adding harmful chemicals, so your confidence can't grow in it. Now, there may be a number of reasons why your environment might not be completely dead. It may just be struggling a little bit. But there might be a number of reasons why your environment, your soil is not capable of sustaining the kind of confidence that you probably should have, given the fact that you know what you're doing and you're good at your job. There could have been a lot of toxic chemicals added to your environment from the outside. So you could have worked in a really difficult environment. You could have had a toxic boss. You could have been in an environment where over time, it created an environment in you which was just not conducive to you feeling confident. Didn't matter what you did, didn't matter how good you were at what you were doing. Working in that kind of environment created an environment in you in which confidence is never going to be able to grow. So those toxic chemicals could have been polluting you from the outside. But for some of you, you would say, well, my team's not that bad. My boss is okay. Generally, things are all right. So I don't know what's going on with my soil. I don't know what should be wrong with my environment. But the reality is, in fact, let me back up and rephrase that. All of the people that I work with have work to do on their internal environment. There have been tons over years of toxic chemicals in the form of habits and behaviors which have been pouring onto your environment, onto your soil. And in that environment, confidence, of course, can't grow. That environment that you have on the inside, whether it's been created by the external circumstances that you've been in, or whether it's been created by the toxic chemicals that you might have unknowingly been putting into your own internal environment over years and years, or whether it's possibly a bit of both, that environment, once it's created, is not capable of sustaining life. Just like that environment, once created, is not capable of sustaining confidence. So let's say you come and sit down with me and you say, okay, Anna, I would like to feel more confident at work. I say, okay. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I wonder what their environment is like. I wonder if they currently have an environment which is capable of growing and sustaining confidence or not. So I'm going to ask you a load of questions that are designed to test out, what is this person's internal environment like? Some of you might be in environments that are downright toxic, and maybe it's impossible for confidence to thrive in that kind of environment. But I'm going to be asking you questions that are designed to figure out, what is your internal environment? What is the soil that we're going to try and grow your confidence in? Is it healthy? Is it capable of sustaining confidence or not? And I have to say that I have never been surprised yet. Maybe one day I'll be surprised, but so far it hasn't happened. If you sit down with me and tell me all about your internal environment, you're going to see pretty quickly that it is not capable of sustaining or growing confidence if that is something that you want to do and it isn't happening. There's a reason why it isn't happening. If you know what you're doing and you know you're good at your job, something else is happening. So there's nothing wrong with the seeds, there's nothing wrong with the plants, but there's something really wrong with the environment that you're trying to grow them in. And that's what we need to figure out. So if you haven't yet taken the confidence assessment, click into the show notes, go and take it now. That assessment is designed to assess your soil quality, assess the environment that you're working in, and to assess whether or not that is capable of growing and sustaining confidence. If you haven't taken it, go and take it. It will personalize this episode for you. But let me just walk you through it and give you some idea of the kinds of things that I'm going to be asking you to figure out. Can we grow confidence in this soil, or do we have to work on the soil first before we do anything else? And usually the answer is we've got to do some work on this soil because it's dead, or it's defunct, or it's toxic. So I'm going to want to know how you've been treating your soil so I can figure out what your environment is like. Poor self-management, unrealistic standards, and a failure to acknowledge good work are a toxic trio of chemicals that you might be unknowingly pouring all over your internal environment every day. And if you are, no wonder your confidence is not as high as you want. It's not a healthy, sustaining environment for confidence. So that number one, poor self-management. The chemicals that you're pouring all over are self-criticism, self-doubt, over-focused on how you're being perceived, creating all that internal pressure and giving yourself no emotional support, actively probably giving yourself a hard time. The second in that toxic trio is having completely unrealistic standards. So expecting a lot, perfection even, and not tolerating anything other than that. So any failure, any mistake, any setback, any misstep will not be tolerated. It's perfection or nothing. That is like a chemical corrosive. You may also be engaging in a bit of comparison, being like, oh, you're not doing that so well, are you? You seem to be the only one. Everyone over there seems to be fine. It's just you. So unrealistic standards are the second in that toxic trio of chemicals that you may be pouring all over your internal environment. Number 3 is around a failure to acknowledge good work. So if you're hell focused on the negatives and probably riding over or kind of ignoring the positives, if you don't really give yourself any internal validation, but you're sure enough give yourself a hard time when something is not right, that is like a chemical cocktail poured all over your internal environment. Because the negatives are looming large and the positives are just kind of swept into the corner and ignored. You're probably not getting that much validation in your work because, let's face it, most of us don't. So if you're not giving it to yourself, where's it coming from? Nowhere. You're just there working away, giving your effort, trying, and probably doesn't feel like a lot's coming back. And then for some of you, it's an outright refusal to acknowledge yourself or give yourself praise. You can't even accept a compliment if it comes. You'll bat it away. You'll think they're being nice, whatever. So even when someone tries to pour something good on your environment, you're like, oh, no. We don't have any of that here. Don't pull that on someone else's field. So that toxic trio, which I call the low confidence cycle, may have been happening in your environment for years. And just like at that farm, years and years of all those chemicals being poured onto the environment every day has degraded the soil to the point where plants cannot grow. And just like that farm, toxic trio of poor self-management, completely unrealistic standards, and a failure to acknowledge any good work may have been poured on your internal environment over days and weeks and months and years without let up. So, of course, your internal environment, your soil, has been degraded to the point where confidence cannot grow, cannot be sustained. And when I say it like that, I'm sure you're like, well, that makes absolute sense. I know that if I was in the kind of environment where I got constantly criticized, constantly doubted, where everyone constantly heaped a load of pressure on me, never gave me any emotional support, told me everything had to be perfect, would never tolerate a mistake, compared me to my colleagues constantly, always focused on the stuff that I did wrong, but never noticed when I did anything right and never gave me any validation or any praise. You know, if you worked in an environment like that, you would not be feeling confident. That is not a healthy, sustainable environment for confidence to grow. But you may be working in that kind of environment day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out. If you've got an internal environment like that, it's the same as pouring those toxic chemicals on the soil every day and then expecting it to grow stuff. It just can't. You cannot pour those habits and those behaviors onto your internal environment every day and expect it to grow you confidence. Even when you're so good at your job, even when you get promotion after promotion, and even when other people all believe in you and tell you how great you are, your environment will still not be able to sustain and grow confidence when it's getting that shit, excuse my French, poured all over it constantly. And I'm not saying this to call you out and be like, you're doing it all wrong. Please don't hear it like that. I'm saying it because most of us do not even notice. We do not even notice that we're pouring these harmful chemicals onto our internal environment day after day, all the bloody time. And I'm here to hold you by the shoulders and shake you and say to you, if you are doing this to yourself, if you have created this kind of internal environment, please think about what it is doing to you. Think about how it is degrading that soil in you from which you're expecting confidence to grow. And how can it? How can it? It can't. But just like this Wilding film was really a good news story, your internal environment can also be a good news story. So it's almost 25 years since they started this Wilding experiment on their farm, since they stopped putting down harmful chemicals and disrupting the soil constantly, and since they let the wildness do its thing, take back over and regenerate itself. So they stopped pouring harmful chemicals on it, but they also introduced some good things, which helped the soil to come back to life so that everything could grow again. And they've had turtle doves, which apparently are on the edge of extinction. They've had breeding storks. They've got beavers. They have loads of butterflies that haven't been seen much in the UK. Their skies are filled with birdsong. That land, if you watch it or if you look online, has come back to life. And it is sustaining life on a beautiful scale. And you can be the same as that farm. You can do what they did. You can make the decision. You have the power. You own the farm. You can decide, as of now, I am wilding, which means I'm going to stop pouring those harmful chemicals, that toxic trio, onto my internal environment every day. And I'm going to add in some good things. So in this case, they added in some animals that they thought probably would have naturally lived in that environment. So they wanted to get as close as they could to what would have been there originally. So they had cattle, like big cattle, scary looking horns and all that, wild ponies and pigs, and all other kinds of animals moved in too. So they took some stuff out and they added some stuff in, and they watched the landscape transform. And your confidence is going to be the same. You're going to take some stuff out, the harmful chemicals that we just talked through, and you're going to add some stuff back in. And that stuff that you add back in is going to be like the organic matter that starts the process of regenerating your internal environment, regenerating your soil, and allowing that confidence to grow naturally, as it will, in abundance, when the environment is right. So the things that you're going to add back in, they're not going to be cows and wild ponies and beavers. They're going to be a beautiful trio of things instead of a toxic trio. The first one is good self-management. The second one is realistic standards. And the third one is fair feedback and acknowledgement for the work that you do. They're like the cows, the ponies, and the pigs that they added back into the farm. And that good self-management that you can add back in is an inner voice which supports you and encourages you. It's some self-trust that you can actually get this right, and you should actually be here, and you are an expert, and you do know what you're doing. It's reduced internal pressure. So instead of piling on the pressure, you're just going to reduce it. You're going to reduce it and just let yourself do your thing. And you're going to allow yourself to focus on what you're doing versus how you're being perceived. So you can stay in the moment, stay present, stay calm, instead of spending all that time in your head. You're going to provide nice emotional support for yourself on difficult days, just like you would for anyone else. And that good self-management that you're going to be adding back in is the organic matter that soil needs and that environment needs in order to start thriving. So let's say that one is the cattle. Next come the wild ponies of realistic standards. So you have to learn how to set realistic standards. If your standard has been extremely high, perfection or nothing, and that has exhausted you and depleted you, no bloody wonder. But when we add in realistic standards, it allows you to breathe. It allows you to make a mistake. It allows you to do a first draft. It allows you to be mindful and be cognizant of the resources and the time that you do have and not expect perfection of yourself all of the time. Again, it allows you to take some of the pressure off. And with that comes an increased tolerance of failure and mistakes and setbacks, because they're going to happen. Nobody loves them. They're not great. But they're a part of life and they're a part of your working life. And once you learn to be okay with yourself and manage yourself properly when they occur, that is the organic matter that you need to go out there and do your thing confidently. Then you're going to remove that comparison. And you're going to add in instead noticing your own strengths and everybody else's and staying in your lane and being okay with it. So that's good self-management, let's call it the cattle, and realistic standards, let's call it the wild ponies. And here comes the third one, the pigs, acknowledging good work. So when you're able to actually give yourself fair feedback, instead of just noticing the stuff that goes wrong and ignoring or brushing over the things that go right, you're going to actually give yourself fair feedback. Yeah, do you know what, Anna? You did do that really well. Okay, that was not the best, but we'll do better next time. Just like you would want from a boss. Fair feedback, which is constructive and useful and respectful and helpful. And actually, acknowledgement when you get something right and giving yourself praise. That is going to be like heaping loads of really nice manure onto the soil. You're helping all the life return to it. Every time you're like, yeah, well done. You did a good job today. Well done on that. Yeah, you really pushed through and that was tough. I'm proud of you. That is like some manure from the pigs that your soil definitely needs. And then you're going to be intentional about focusing on the positives and your progress. Not just seeing the gap and the error and the place where you've still got to improve, but actually being like, no, look how far I've come. Haven't I done well? And yes, you have. So when you remove those toxic trio of poor self-management, unrealistic standards, and a failure to acknowledge good work, and you add in good self-management, realistic standards, and fair feedback and acknowledging good work, you take out the harmful chemicals and you add back in the stuff that your soil, that your environment needs in order to grow its own confidence. If you get this right, if you get the environment right, you don't need loads of fancy tricks and puffing yourself up and wearing a fancy suit and pretending that you're confident. You don't need any of that. Get the environment right and the rest will follow. Trust me, I've seen it. I've worked with it so many times. It's just like they found at the farm. Take away the bad stuff, add in some good stuff, and watch stuff grow organically. Your confidence is the same. Trust me when I say it. You don't need to think about how to mask your insecurities and how to fake it and how to pretend. That is bollocks. This is the real deal. Learning how to get your culture right, your environment right. And this is an inside job. This is a job that you can do, even if you're in a challenging external environment, and you might be. Say fuck 'em and think, there is something that I can do. I can work on getting my internal environment as right as I possibly can do. So at least some confidence can grow, even if this is a pretty barren land that I'm in right now. You can work on getting your internal environment right. You can work on bringing that soil back to life with all of that great organic matter and watch the birds come back to the trees and release the beavers into the river and see all the bugs and the mice and everything good. Your confidence will grow when you have the environment right. If you want to figure out where your environment is at right now, I'm encouraging you again to go and take the confidence assessment. It's free and it is the accompanying resource to this podcast. It'll take what you've heard here and it'll run you through a few simple questions designed to find out what your internal environment is like right now and whether or not that's a place where confidence can grow. If it is, great, we're going to tell you. But if it isn't, also great, we're going to tell you that it isn't, and we're going to help you to think about what it is you could tweak in your environment to start taking out some of the harmful chemicals and adding in some of the good stuff that's going to create the kind of environment that your confidence needs. There is a link in the show notes, or you can go to the website www.yesyoucoaching.com and click on the top right-hand corner where it says Take the Confidence Assessment. And I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.